What's going on, everybody? Kalipa's Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G and going over whether or not it's a good phone to buy in 2022. Now, before we go any further, I do want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. And if you happen to find this video after you bought the phone, be sure to check out my tips and tricks videos for the phone as well. But with that being said, let's get started. So this phone has a 6.5-inch 90Hz PLS TFT display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 270, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and a screen-to-body ratio of about 81.1%. Overall, for an entry-level phone, it's pretty standard except for the 90Hz part. That's a little bit less common, but even then, today in 2022, we are seeing more and more 90Hz displays on lower-end phones. Now, in case you don't know what it does, a 90Hz display is basically going to have slightly faster and smoother movement on the screen than a 60Hz display. So if you're planning on doing lots of content consumption, like streaming videos and playing games and stuff like that, this is definitely going to help out a little bit and give you a slightly better experience. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not a game changer by any means, but all the same, it is a nice thing to have. Now, as for the rest of the display, it's pretty standard for a lower end phone like this. A resolution of 720p, 6.5 inches, 20:9 form factor, nothing out of the ordinary, but with that being said, it's still gonna be a really nice display for any type of usage. So whether you're streaming videos, playing games, even just reading, the screen is decently large and it looks really nice. I mean, the colors are nice and vibrant. The image is pretty crisp and clear. So even though we're not getting a 1080p display or anything like that, it's still gonna be good. Now, as far as the design for the phone itself goes, it's also not too bulky. So even though the display itself is on the larger side, the phone is also gonna be pretty comfortable to hold in your hand and carry in your pocket. Now up top here, we got a water drop notch for the front-facing camera, and this camera is 5 megapixels. I was hoping that with this generation of Samsung phones, they'd finally start putting hole punch cameras on everything, but it looks like we're not there yet. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but I'm not the biggest fan of water drop notches. I think it looks a little bit outdated, especially today in 2022. When we got phones like the Motorola Moto G Power that just recently came out that's around the same level as this phone, and that phone does have a nice looking hole punch camera. So I do hope that in the near future, Samsung starts to change the design of the front facing camera for their lower end phones. But with that being said, it's a really small detail, and compared to other water drop notches on other phones, it's not really that bad. Now for storage, this phone has 64 gigabytes of internal storage with micro SD card expansion. So this is a pretty good amount of storage. It's not 128 gigabytes, of course, which would have been nice, but 64 gigabytes of internal storage, especially with the ability to put a micro SD card in it, is probably going to be enough for most people. Now, if you're a power user and you have a lot of apps on your phone and just a bunch of photos and videos in general and stuff like that, then you might want to look at a phone that has an option to get more storage, because this phone, as of the recording of this video, doesn't have a variant that has more than 65 gigabytes like the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, for example, does. So definitely keep that in mind. If you want a ton of storage, there are better options out there. But if you're content with 64 gigabytes, which I feel like most people will be, then this is going to be fine. Now, there's no wireless charging for this phone, but we do have a fingerprint scanner right here on the power key, and we also get face unlock with this device as well. So that's pretty nice to have both options. Not really uncommon or anything, but some phones in this price range don't have face unlock, so it doesn't hurt to have both. Now, with that being said, let's give this fingerprint scanner a try and see how well it works. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, this fingerprint scanner is real fast and responsive. I have no complaints here. One thing I will say about this fingerprint scanner, especially since it's on the power key, is this button feels really solid, especially for a phone in this price range. A lot of phones under $300, especially a 5G phone like this, where I'm sure Samsung did what they could to cut costs in order to give us such an affordable 5G phone, do tend to have flimsy buttons, but this phone really doesn't. The design does feel pretty solid. Now, taking a look at the rear camera setup of the phone, we got a triple camera here with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So unfortunately, we don't get an ultra wide, which I am a little bit disappointed about. because the ultra-wide camera is so useful, but at least we get portrait mode with the depth sensor, and of course there's a macro camera. I don't really use this feature too much myself, but if you like taking macro photos, of course this is going to be a nice thing for you to have. With all that being said, I am especially impressed with the main camera. A 50 megapixel camera on an entry-level 5G phone like this is definitely no joke, and this phone can take some nice photos. To give you an idea of what this phone can really do camera-wise, this is a photo taken with the main camera, and it is pretty impressive. The colors look really nice and vibrant, the sharpness and general quality is really there, and overall the lighting and the focus is done well too. So if you're planning on taking a lot of photos you're going to keep for social media or something like that, this phone is going to be a real good option because not only does it have a really high quality camera, but it's also more of an entry-level phone, and despite this, it still compares to the more mid-range phones that really start to get up there in camera quality. Now taking a look at the camera itself, of course we got our normal photo mode. Unfortunately, again, no ultra-wide camera, but we do have this little zoom button here. You can go up to 10x zoom as you can see here, although I probably wouldn't. Since this phone doesn't have a telephoto lens, zooming in that much is probably going to destroy the quality. Then of course we got portrait mode where you can get those nice blurred out backgrounds, and you can also control the intensity of the blur, which is a nice feature too, not unusual by any means. But there are even some higher end phones like the iPhone 13 for example, where you can't do this. So it's nice that on a phone like this you can. Now if we go to the more section, you can see we got our macro camera, pro mode, panorama, this food setting. I've never even touched this. I don't even know what it does. I guess it's specifically for taking pictures of food, basically an alternate version of portrait mode or something like that. So if you are in a situation where you want to use it, obviously you can. And then if we go up here, you can also change your aspect ratio. And I really like that this phone has more aspect ratios than usual because I feel like a lot of the lower end phones don't have the 1:1 ratio, or they don't have the 9:16 ratio or 16:9, however you want to put it. So it's nice that with this phone, you get all the options just in case you have different situations you're taking photos for, where one aspect ratio might work better than the other. So overall, I am really impressed with the camera on this phone. It may not have a ton of different features, but it does have some nice ones, and the overall quality of the camera itself is really good as well. Now, if you want to learn more about the camera and how you can use it, be sure to check out my camera tips and tricks for this phone where I go over it in more detail. Now for video, this phone has a max shooting quality of 1080p in both the rear and the front cameras, so no 4K or anything like that. Not really that much of a surprise, although the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G is able to shoot in 4K and it's not too terribly more expensive than this phone. In fact, I don't even know if it is more expensive than this phone for that matter. At this point in 2022, I haven't heard a whole lot about the A33 5G. It's probably around the corner though. So I would say if you want to be able to shoot in 4K and you want a phone similar to this one, definitely look at the A32 5G or maybe wait for the A33 5G. But as for this phone itself, no 4K or even 2K, but if that doesn't bother you, the 1080p videos shot by this phone are pretty decent, so not having 4K isn't too much of a loss in my opinion. Now internally, we're getting 4GB of RAM with this phone with the MediaTek Dimensity 700 5G processor. I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test a little while ago, and it came back with a single core score of 467 and a multi-core score of 1111. Now I recommend running a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on your current device and comparing it to this to see if this phone would be an upgrade, because out of context these scores don't really mean a whole lot, but I will say from experience, I've found this phone to be decently fast in most regards. If you're just doing web browsing, social media kind of stuff, it's going to be perfectly fine. Now when you're doing more high-end activities with this phone like playing games, especially ones that are more graphics heavy, it's probably going to struggle a bit, but otherwise I haven't had any performance issues. So if you're going to be on your phone a lot but not necessarily doing anything too RAM intensive, then this phone should work out fine. Now the battery is definitely a strong point for this phone. We got a 5000 mAh battery that supports 15 watt fast charging. So not only are you getting a large battery that's going to last you a long time throughout the day, but also if you ever need to charge it up a little bit faster, you do have the 15 watt fast charging available, so it won't take quite as much time to power it up. Now, another cool thing about having a large battery like this is that down the road, as the battery degrades, which all batteries do, it's not going to kill this phone's battery life as quickly as it would with, say, a 3000 milliamp hour battery. So if you like to get one phone and keep it for a long time without replacing it, this phone is definitely a good option for that reason. Another nice thing about this phone is that it has NFC. In case you don't know what it is, NFC is the technology behind contactless mobile payment systems. So if you like to use Google Pay, this phone is going to be a good option because not a lot of phones in this price range, even today in 2022, have NFC, so that's something to keep in mind. So now that we've gone over some of the specs of the phone, let's take a closer look at the device itself. On the left side here, we got the slot for the SIM card and the microSD card. On the bottom, we got a 3.5mm headphone jack, the microphone, a USB-C port, and the speaker. On the right side, we got the power key, which remember, this is also the fingerprint scanner. Volume keys right here. On the top of the phone, we got the noise canceling microphone. On the back, we got our camera setup and our flash. And a Samsung logo right down here. The back is made of a matte material, and unfortunately in the lighting, you can really see the fingerprints. But other than that, I do think it looks decently nice. While the phone in general doesn't feel very premium, it doesn't feel cheap either. You can tell by its weight and just the general build quality that this is a really well-made phone. So in conclusion, is the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G worth buying in 2022? Well, I would say it absolutely is. If you're looking for an entry-level 5G phone with a nice looking display, a decent amount of storage, a really high quality camera, a large battery, and a pretty good processor that's going to be able to withstand moderately heavy use, doing more basic activities like web browsing, video streaming, and social media stuff, then the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G is going to be a great option. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And as always, I will see you in the next video.